All right, there we go. What do you guys think of Josh Adams? Let's get some comments in the chat here. Looks like some people's maybe some epiphanies were happening. Good, amazing, perfect, very interesting. Would like to learn more. Yeah, so I encourage you to reach out. Somebody asked, I know Lane asked the question, will it work on dry land? And context specific, the only reason it won't work is things are a lot more responsive when you add irrigation. So will it work? Yes. I would definitely talk to Josh about that. And then our next speaker is right here. I want to welcome up William DeMille. He and I are going to do this next section together. It's like we're both fit on camera. Does go ahead and sing a song or something, William. Make sure we.
Okay, how you doing? Can everybody hear me?
Guys, give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me, hear William. Okay. If you don't know William DeMille, you guys are on for a treat. Yeah, Leah knows him, huh? Cool. Well, first of all, let's give an introduction to William. So William came to work on our ranch in 2020. He built us an amazing greenhouse. If you haven't checked that out on his YouTube channel, what's your YouTube channel?
Yeah, just William DeMille, Gardening with William DeMille. We'll bring it up.
Okay, check that out. He also manages soil fertility on our ranches that we manage, and very much following the same principles that Josh Adams uses. So very biological based management style. So what are we going to talk about today?
The 4 ecosystem processes.
Okay, cool. We're going to talk about that. So let's I've got a slideshow. William's got his book. Show him your book, William. Everybody needs a copy of this. What's the title there? So they got it on the audio.
It's called Worry-Free Eating.
Okay. So there you go. I have a challenge, and I would love for somebody, go ahead and put in the chat here, and maybe Lydia, you can help us out. And if you guys just have something that you think is going to stump William, we're going to play Stump William here.
This is going to be fun.
So just think of the.
I didn't sign up for this, but it sounds fun.
Think of the nastiest, worst, who has the worst soil health problem, production issue, cattle dying, weeds everywhere, doesn't grow anything, and we'll see if we can address that. So go ahead. So what I'm going to ask is that you be concise in typing out what your question or issue is, and then if we ask you to come on camera, that you again be concise. We don't need to know about your grandma and your Aunt Sue and Uncle Billy. It's just, here's the issue. How do we resolve it? Fair enough? Okay, and if we find that person, you'll be the lucky winner of a free consultation worth a lot.
$500.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so for a little context here, I've got some slides we'll share. William's going to draw from his book, and we're going to, because the picture's worth 1,000 words. You guys already know what stewardship is, right? It's that sacred, this is what I was trying to paraphrase earlier. Stewardship designates a sacred spiritual and temporal responsibility to take care of something that belongs to God, for which we are accountable. Take a picture of that. That's a good one to remember. We know that, hey, some people say we're not going to live very long because we're going to run out of topsoil. This was 2014, so we're 10 years further into that, 50 years, and we're going to all die, right?
That's what they think.
This was an actual picture in Idaho. 4 tons of topsoil is lost every year when we on our farm ground on average. This happened during the flood of 2017. I had to stop and take a picture of that because it was like, yeah, this is real. We already looked at those. So you guys take a picture if you need to know the 6 soil health principles. They're everywhere. And your additional one is to the 6 soil health principles.
Oh, yeah. Mindfulness. We need to be mindful. We got to be thinking.
Okay. All right. Brittleness scale. This goes back to Lane's question. Things are going to be more responsive, more biologically active if they're lower on the brittleness scale. That's why Josh prefers to work in irrigated environments. But just as both Burke mentioned yesterday, we can have from a fence line to fence line, we can have different variations in this brittleness scale. So our uplands are going to be higher in brittleness, at least here in the arid west. Our meadows are going to be lower. So context matters. And there's the composition of soil, in case anybody didn't know. Anything to add on that?
You want it to look like the dark one.
Okay, what's the biggest difference between the left and the right here? Somebody put it in the chat. Take a picture of that. There's two big things that jump out. This thing right here. Everybody hold your breath for the rest of the presentation and see how much you get out of it. Not a lot's going to happen, right? We have to have air, and as soil organic matter increases, things go better. Again, you can take a picture of that. We won't go into that necessarily, but this is just saying of the organic matter, there are things that are dead, living, and really dead. So, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, this is where we're at. Water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow, community dynamics. Why do these things matter? Because we'll just go through that. Josh talked about energy flow, however many. Well, I think I actually have his quote right there. Was that the same? Or did he say 5,000 pounds of horsepower? That was a quote. Maybe he's updated. So 5 now? Okay. His science is updated. Each square foot, 5,000 pounds of horsepower hit the ground. What does this mean for management, William? How do we increase the energy flow on our farms, ranches, square foot garden?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we got to believe that this is real. And then we need to collect as much sunlight as we possibly can. How do we do it? We grow more plants with different shapes. That's the easy way. So if all you have is what they call an improved pasture, that's an oxymoron term, but that's what they've called it for decades. You have an improved pasture that basically has 1 or 2 or 3 species. That is not diversity. You need 20, 30, 40 species. 100 species would be better. Include some trees out there. Obviously, context comes into it. So, if you can't have a tree, that's fine. But the most productive pastures have some trees in there. So,
okay. Yep. So harvest as much of that sunlight. The sun's going to shine whether it's on bare soil or not. This is just a diagram from the Savory Institute about what energy flow actually does. We're going to increase biomass. It's going to benefit everything. So as long as the sun comes up in the morning, I think we can change those statistics that we're going to run out of arable land and die here in 50 years. If the sun doesn't come up, all bets are off. How much photosynthesis is happening here?
The hills in the background look really good. See how there's trees in all around each of those paddocks? So whoever's managing that one's doing it right.
Yeah.
But this one in the foreground that you were talking about, that's a problem.
Okay. So we need to look at that. You might think this is on our ranch. Obviously, it's not the wintertime. This is probably mid-May, early June. You might think, well, we're wasting a lot of grass. We abide by the rule of the thirds during the growing season, where there's a third of the grass goes to the big critter that we're feeding, a big to the little critters that we stomp on the ground when we lay down to be able to feed the microbiology, and then we leave a third standing so that it can photosynthesize and capture and regrow as quickly as possible. So management matters, right? Management matters, bottom line. Anything to add on that one? Anything on the?
Just look at the trees. There's trees there.
Yep.
Every rancher out there that I know who's over 60 years old wants to cut down all the trees. Well, don't do that anymore.
We're planting trees, whereas my grandpa and my dad cut down a lot of trees. And they're starting to see now that, hey, things are improving. Well, I'm sure my grandpa does too. He's not here mortally. Okay, water cycle. Josh talked about that. What are the important things we need to know about water cycle?
I mean, water is everything. The big thing to remember, I want to make this your big takeaway. People can make it rain. And when I say that, people look at me like I have 3 eyeballs. But we can actually make it rain if we grow more plants, especially with a lot of trees. If you have, what is it, 10,000 acres minimum, managed properly, you'll increase your thunderstorms. So that's the thing. And if you can remember that, then you can start thinking about, okay, so what do we do to actually make that happen? And that gets the conversation going. And it's a much longer class than we're doing today, but remember, people can make it rain by managing properly.
Okay, so what are the indicators of a functioning water cycle? Let's talk about this for just a minute. And if you have anything to add, let me see if I can get rid of that. We can actually see it. Okay. You can see that. When you're observing, what are your observations, either through infiltration tests, or how do you tell, like, hey, this water cycle is working versus not?
So if we get a big rain and then about 6-8 weeks later, everything's still green, the water cycle is working, because it's not about how much rain you're getting, it's about how much moisture is staying in the soil and keeping your plants alive. So it has a lot more to do with the soil and how the soil is holding the water and able to feed those plants that stored water. It's much more about that than the actual rainfall that you get. It's about how much you get. Now, if it rains and then everything's drying up next week, your water cycle is broken.
Yeah, so actually the water should be, how much rain you get, you should get all of it. The water should be infiltrating into the ground. It should be recharging aquifers. If you're seeing sheet flow when it rains, if you're seeing water running off, it's an indicator that, hey, something's wrong. The soil has the capacity to be a sponge if it's managed correctly, and you should see minimal runoff.
Yeah.
I mean, even on heavy rain events, and
Yeah.
we might think, well, that we've never seen that. Well, maybe we haven't in our lifetime.
If one thing to add to that, if the water is dirty and muddy running off your field, that's a big problem. That means you're not infiltrating properly.
Yeah.
And so you're taking away that erosion. The water will run off if you get a big enough rain, and that's okay as long as the water is clean and clear.
Yeah, not like the picture that I showed earlier where it's actually created a big gully in their center pivot farm ground. So, okay, mineral cycle. This one's my favorite. You can screenshot this. Indicators of good mineral cycle, indicators of poor mineral cycle. My favorite way is to just look at these guys. Talk about, I mean, it's lunchtime here. What else would you rather look at than a beautiful cow pie? There's a lot of good things about this cow pie. It has a pond. It's not too runny. It's showing that, hey, there's a carbon nitrogen balance in this cow's rumen, the fiber and the protein, basically. Otherwise, it would be caked. If it was too much fiber, it would be runny. If it was too much protein, you can look at the grass that we've grazed. This is post-grazing. So what other indicators on the mineral cycle? Again, you guys can screenshot that if you want to. I encourage you to be looking at these when you're out in your fields. Have these 4 ecosystem processes in mind. Start to think of it in this holistic manner. But
yeah, the mineral cycle's super important, obviously. How quick are those cow pies decomposing? Are they still there 3 months after you've moved your cattle? You may have your rotational grazing dialed in, so you're moving them perfectly and your grass is growing pretty good. But are the cow pies still there 3 months later? If they are, your mineral cycle is broken. Go out there about 5 to 10 days after you've moved your cattle, and the cow pies will start drying up. We're talking about the summertime when it's dry. When they start drying up, turn those over, and you should see all kinds of insects. You need to see earthworms in there eating them. You need to see the dung beetles eating them. There will be other insects eating them. So if you don't have the insects that are getting rid of those cow pies, something's wrong with your mineral cycle. That's an indicator that you need to work on that.
what if you need to worm your cattle?
Don't worm your cattle.
What? Heresy around here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, what happens if we worm our cattle?
A cattle wormer will kill the insects, and so it breaks your mineral cycle.
Yep.
So,
okay. So worms are not worms, flies, lice, all those things. They're just a reflection of management. Change up your management when you're moving frequent, you're moving often, you break the life cycle of those insects and pests. And so it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Mineral cycle is a really easy one to measure, but it's one of the four. It's not like one is more important than the other. Okay, and then where are we at? Community dynamics, soil food web. Explain to us simply what community dynamics means.
It's just the way that every living thing and mineral thing is working together. It would be all the ecological processes working together. Usually we're talking about the living biological critters, from the microscopic guys all the way up to your biggest herbivores. But if you take out a keystone species, your entire ecosystem can collapse. And when it comes to a grassland, the grazers are your keystone species. So when you're looking at the southwestern United States and a lot of the national parks in that region, when they thought that they were going to save the land by removing the grazers, they desertified the land. I mean, go to Arches National Park sometime and see how much grass is there. There used to be grass there. Go to the Navajo Indian Reservation. I have a friend, she's the county extension agent in Blanding, Utah. And she's an Indian down there, and she said that her grandmother used to struggle to find the sheep. They lived in Monument Valley. They couldn't find the sheep every day because the grass was so tall. How many of you have ever been to Monument Valley recently? There's no grass at all. There's nothing but bare desert sand. And we assume it's always been that way. But her grandmother remembers when she was a child, they couldn't find the sheep because the grass was so tall. And we can restore these ecosystems the way that they need to be, but we have to bring back the keystone species, which would be the grazers, cattle, sheep, goats.
Yep, well said. So to bring everything back around, when we do our annual monitoring with Savory Institute, this is the site that scores the best on the ranch. And I guess, William, tell us what's good about this site and if there's anything that's missing.
The only thing missing is a cow, although it's actually not, because we do graze this every year. This site looks really good. This is fantastic. You can see a lot of different species here. You see trees, you see old trees in the background. The top right corner of the picture, those are old mature trees. You see brand new trees that are springing up in the very front, in the center. There's baby trees coming up. And then you have the middle-aged trees there in the center. So you have the whole age group of species. If you don't have a full age group of species, then it tells us that your community dynamics or ecological succession, it's another way of saying the same thing, but it's broken. You may have a forest, and if all the trees are the same age and there's no baby ones growing, you're probably not as healthy as you need to be. You need to be looking around and making sure that you actually have new trees coming up. And if you don't, then you're probably going to be a desert in 200 years, because all those plants are going to die. They're not reproducing. So that's what I'm seeing in this picture. I do see a lot of very good diversity of plants. We've got flowering plants in there, which would be the forbs. I don't see legumes right here, but I know they're up there because I've walked this piece.
Yeah.
Lots of different species of grass. So yeah, it looks healthy to me.
Okay. So if you look, so this is facing north. If you turn 180 degrees, it's going to look very different. That will be a sagebrush. But what we're seeing is that this riparian zone is starting to spread further out into the brush. The trees are spreading further out into the brush. Well, does every square foot of our ranch look like this? Absolutely not. But we're encouraging this type of activity more. Or this is when you think about the vision that you're creating. We're going to shift to that for just a minute. My wife and I, probably 15 years ago, we updated a vision statement for our business, and we talked about in that vision statement that the riparian zones were healing, that there was diversity, that there were sedges and trees and willows, and that beavers were moving back into the landscape. And because we set the vision, because we managed for that, we're now seeing those things happen. And this is what we're seeing in our irrigated fields. And again, not every spade full looks like this. This is a cow pie just turned over in the springtime. This is right against the irrigation ditch. And we're seeing a lot more life in our fields. And last year, this is what we saw in one of our meadows. Beavers have been absent my whole lifetime in this landscape. I don't think it was necessarily my parents or predecessors' intention to get rid of them, but because of the practices of removing willows and then continuous grazing, they had no habitat. And now after 15, almost 20 years of very intentional, mindful management, this is what we're starting to see coming back into the landscape. And to us, that's pretty awesome. What do you think about beavers?
I love them. They're great. Every ranch should have at least one beaver.
And we hope to have thousands of them. That's because we've got the landscape. They were there historically. They're starting to move back. Their dams held through the water last year, which was pretty encouraging, whereas years before they washed out. 2017, we lost a lot. But now we're starting to build back some real stability and resilience. So our ranch is just, as Burke talked about in the ranches that he's managed, at some point they reach this tipping point. And we have to make sure that the profitability is there. We have to make sure the vision is there, the management's there, and the team's there, so that we don't abort this thing too early and say, hey, that regenerative thing doesn't work. Because again, nature doesn't wear a watch. We measure things by our time. We want to speed things up. And this has been over a decade to get to this point. But now imagine what it's going to look like a decade from now. I can only imagine how much our water table will rise. You know, whereas this, I don't think I have the before and after pictures, which I need to add that to this slide. But very, the stream banks were very incised earlier. Very few willows, minimal sedges. There really wasn't a floodplain. You know, it was just high water. It would come and it would take more soil, and off it'd go down to the neighbors. And so we've reversed that. So those are the 4 ecosystem processes. Anything else from your book you want to share before we jump into some Q&A?
Not necessarily. Just one simple thing. I've got 7 pages in my book that has this big chart. And the whole thing is understanding the ecosystem processes. So if you do want to get this book, it's available on Amazon. But each column here is a different ecosystem process. And then I just put in the questions on the side, just common questions that people may have. And so as you go through this and start reading it, it helps you to adapt your own property and your own operation to how to do your own thing. Because if you try to run it like my ranch, it isn't necessarily the right thing. You need to run it like your ranch. So this is a tool that helps you to understand the ecosystem processes and how to, how to get them working for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very good. So just looking through here. Okay, who thinks, raise your hand if you think you have a question that can stump William. I've got John. He's a good one in here. We've got GA. Do you guys know how to raise your virtual hand? Okay, and you will be called out on this. We want to be like, okay, yeah, Worry-Free Eating book. That's William's book.
Yeah, Worry-Free Eating. It's on by William DeMille. That's me. It's on Amazon.
Okay. Let's see. Where are you at in John? Do you want to come forward? I know you had a question last time. John Mayer. Go ahead and let's see. I don't know if I can unmute you. I guess I should ask, are you willing to? We'd love to have a little discussion here. Okay, we've got a phone number here. We're going to do this. Again, be concise. Okay, we'll do this and then we'll go to you, John. All right, give us a little bit of context and then ask your Stump William question. This is going to be fun.
Well, like a lot of places across the country, we've got a lot of subsurface subsurface tile drainage. Wondering how that affects aquifer recharge.
Yeah, where are you at in the country and what are you
Oh, I'm
growing?
in southeast Minnesota, but all of the upper Midwest here is all the way across Minnesota. The lower half is practically all tiled out.
Hmm. And
There's still a lot more going in, but
are
so
you
there's
grazing? Are you farming? What's your
yeah,
practices and enterprises?
yeah. I'm a regenerative farmer. Now have taken everything out of row crop, although I was full on conventional row crop. Um, Now I've got everything seeded down, subdivided with fencing, some water in place, and running cattle on the whole works. So,
Okay, how's your production been since you've switched from crops to grazing?
well, it's hard to, I mean, production of what the ground is growing is somewhat hard to gauge because I wasn't growing the same crops now, you know. But
Uh-huh.
my production as far as carrying capacity and that is increasing steadily every year. Even we would have been 22. We were in a D4 drought, and I carried more livestock that year than I did the year before when we weren't in a drought, and have been increasing slightly every year.
Very cool. Very cool. So good question. So your question is tile drainage, how does it affect the recharge of the aquifer?
Yep.
And I would be, how does it affect, overall the water cycle?
Yeah.
That's
So
a good question.
here's my thought on that. This answer kind of depends on how big we're talking. If you're talking thousands of acres or like 100 or whatever, but you're running those tiles away from the land to the ditches so that it's going into the rivers and so on. Um, I guess there's a possibility that water could get into the aquifer, okay, because it's just going off your fields. But here's the thing, you're losing all that water that should be infiltrating and being held in your soil sponge. Now, the reason they do the tile, obviously, is so that the ground's not too wet, but it won't be too wet if your microbes are functioning properly. So you just need to focus on getting the microbes in the land, and that's what you're doing by having it seeded down and then moving your livestock across it. That's the very best tool there is the rumen of the bovine. It's the best compost vat there is, and so it's going to get all of those microbes out there. And I mean, and you just said you're already seeing improvements. Your carrying capacity is coming up. So if you're dealing with droughts, I plug some of those tiles up, see what happens. I mean, maybe not plug them all up at once, but like, I'm not sure. Have you got terraced land? Is that how it's working?
No, mine isn't terrace, but I can tell you, I struggled with this when I was doing the row cropping because the ground here is really heavy. We've got about 120 feet of glacial till that's mostly clays before
Yeah,
you get to the bedrock. So
yeah,
it ain't going
Wow.
down through very fast, right? And then when you get heavy rains, it's makes it pretty hard to farm. It doesn't dry
yeah,
out very quick. But
yeah.
what I'll tell you is I put in 50,000 feet in an untiled area of the farm in 2013. That was a no plant year around here for most everybody because it was so wet.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
where I've still got a few spots on the farm where I still don't have tile. That was when I was still row cropping, obviously. Um, when I first bought the farm, it was in CRP, and then I took it out of CRP, was growing hay, and then went into row cropping, and the farm got wetter and wetter and wetter. So then I ended up putting in that tile. Now that I've seeded it down, those areas that when I was row cropping would have water oozing out of the hill no longer oozes water out of the hill. I can drive across it anytime, doesn't matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's,
Yeah.
and I'm running cattle across it now, and I call it, I press the easy button, there's no quicker way to get where you want to go than to seed it all down into perennials, get those perennial roots, and then put livestock back out on the land. You're just kickstarting everything in top gear.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the one thing to remember is the thing that breaks up those heavy clays is your beneficial microbes. So you're doing the right thing.
Yep. Is there anything technologically wise, just thinking about keyline plowing, anything that would help if the infiltration's an issue or any? We're not necessarily adamantly opposed to technology, but we've got to be sure, like what Josh said, if you're going to spend $1, it's going to bring you back 3 or 5 or 10, not just.
Yeah, I mean, it would just depend on the actual situation where you are. I hate to say because I'm not there looking at the land, so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my answer.
My own attitude about that would be, anytime I push a piece of steel in the ground, I'm destroying the habitat for the biology to some extent, one extent or another. And you can fix it somewhat temporarily, but you're probably doing more long-term harm than good by going that way. Your best thing is to get the live roots in that soil, get that biology functioning. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yep. Good question. Well, you didn't stump him, so we better look for another one. April, I know you had a question earlier. Are you able to unmute? Would you like to ask your question?
I think I just unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
Here, I'll share my. There, I showed my video. I don't know if that helps you. So, how do you deal with erosion on hills? And my hill is actually the second tallest bluff in the county. So I mean, it's pretty high. I can't remember what the elevation of it is. If you can see my video, I have it here in the background. It gets pretty steep there, and we constantly, every spring, I mean, we're in Wisconsin, we get heavy snowfalls, which we've gotten lucky the last few years. We get washouts like crazy, and we can't seem to get it to stop running off the hill so bad.
Okay, anytime you have erosion like that, it means you don't have enough plants covering the ground. So it's most likely overgrazed.
Okay, well.
What is your management in the woodland?
See, and right now we're trying to manage it by, opening up areas so the cattle can graze in there better, try to get their biology into the woods a little more to help sustain that bottom growth on the woods. But, some of those steep hills you really can't get to, and the cows won't get to either. So,
yeah. So yeah, in those trees, I would thinning them out is a good idea so you can get more light.
We're trying to get sunlight in there, yeah.
Perfect. So. Yeah, that's the right strategy. Wisconsin. Every county in the country is different, and Wisconsin is a lot different than each county. So let me just throw out a generalization that may not be totally true, but the principle is right. You need to have just enough trees that you can grow a lot of grass. And then you'll know when you're there because you're growing more grass where the trees are than you are in just an open pasture. Okay?
Alrighty.
Because when you get the balance of trees to grass just right, you'll grow more grass in the forest.
Alrighty.
That's a good.
So that'll be your ecological indicator to know when you get there. So in about 12 years, call me back and let me know.
Well, we work on it every year. We use a wood boiler to heat the house. So
nice.
So we cut those trees out in the woods to kind of limit what's growing up and stuff. So.
Yeah. Cool. Good question, April.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate that. Well, we still didn't stump William, so maybe I'm going to have to come up with a question here that we can. So, how do you get started on down this regenerative biological it's like we've been in here for a day and a half and there's a ton of stuff to do. And maybe, I don't know, maybe people are overwhelmed. Are you overwhelmed? It's like, okay, just because there a recipe, is there a do this, then this, then this. What's the first step?
The very first step is surround yourself with like-minded people. Make friends with 20 other people who are trying to do the same thing, people who have the same foundation. If your core group of your 20 people in your life think you're, excuse the swear word, but think you're an idiot for trying to do this, then get a new group of friends. Because socially is the biggest, I think that's the weakest link. It's a social thing. Because we know this works. It does work. You can go visit 20 farms in the next week where the regenerative whole thing is thriving and working really good. But people just, they don't do it. They can't get started if they can't believe in themselves, and other people aren't believing in them either. So it's not so much about how you're going to manage your cattle or your sheep or your pasture or your woodlot or your garden. It's not what you're doing on the land near as much as what you're doing with your social group. I've just noticed that's the big weak link.
Yeah, we are the sum of our 5 closest friends. And if our 5 closest friends are naysayers and telling us it won't work, guess what? Right? It won't work, because that's what we tend to believe.
Yeah.
Is what we hear all the time.
Yeah, somebody just said in the chat, Christina said, amen, that's totally what's happening to me. I'm all alone. You're not alone because you're here today. You've got me, you've got Jared, you've got Josh Adams. You've got some of the best people in this whole place. And the whole world, right here. Jared's very well connected and he brings in incredible speakers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
join this community.
That's a big reason why we are doing what we're doing, especially with the membership area that we'll talk to you about at the 2-day class. Is we need a community, because when we started this journey, we were the village idiot, and a lot of times things didn't work, and so people had good reason to criticize us because we didn't know what we were doing and we didn't have a mentor or a guide. So we may not be able to tell April exactly what to do in her context in Wisconsin, but the principles of soil health apply from the Chihuahuan Desert to the tropics. Right? Those same principles apply. What about the alkalinity question that we had up here? How do we switch stuff or convert alkali ground into productive ground? Good question, Jimmy. Where are you from? Are you in the West? Just curious, but I don't know if I have the answer. We've been working at it, but
yeah. So here's the principle, and the principle is not always practical because there can be another dozen factors besides the ground being alkaline. Okay, but the reason that ground is the way it is the microbes are dead. You've got to get the good microbes in there, and microbes are exactly like cattle. They want food and water. So on the alkaline ground, we've got to get the food and the water there to feed the microbes. So I've not done this, but a lot of the people in the regen movement will feed their cattle on that alkaline ground, and then there's a lot of manure there, and then the old hay and stuff that they didn't eat is still there, and then that helps to repair that ground. You get that alkaline soil gets really bad. It can take a long time. It can take a decade or more to fix some of those places. We have some of them here on this ranch.
Yeah, and you remember that first time when Josh came, I think you had just barely gotten here and we bounced around in your side by side. So we saw those really robust crested wheat plants that the grasshoppers weren't attacking, and it had dried out, and that's where we'd fed, where we bale grazed. Yeah. How do you effectively do that over thousands of acres? It's tough, but you do it a little bit. And I think what Burke said, as you start to build these little islands out amongst these alkaline, those will start to grow if your management supports that. Yeah. So you'll find that the alkalinity decreases, but it's a long game. Somebody asked about using sulfur. It can help. It can lower the pH. People will use acids in their irrigation water to be able to lower the pH. It's again, what's that going to do to the biology? If it
Yes,
addresses
yeah.
the symptom or the root problem.
Yeah, that's just anytime you're using an input like that, I say anytime, most of the time, you're just dealing with that symptom and you're not really fixing the problem. The problem is always a lack of beneficial microbes. That's always like in all the soils everywhere. If your soil is not growing plants, it's because your microbes are dead. So you've got to feed and water those microbes. So that's the key. And, there's a lot of other things too, but that's where you start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, good comments, Caesar and Jerry. You have to look at it strategically. My dad was really big on planting grass. And even this year, he's like, Jared, go plant some more grass in this alkaline patch. I'm like, we've tried 3 times. Are we gonna, is this insanity here?
Yeah.
So we've got to do something different besides just trying to plant these alkaline tolerant species. That said, we did negotiate and we're like, okay, we're going to try some tall wheatgrass with channels, high pH, but we're going to do it strategically. Instead of doing it over 2,000 acres, we're going to do maybe 100 acres and we'll see, and we'll measure our results.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that people face when they commit to being regenerative?
Huh. Maybe that one stumped me. Give me a second.
We'll let it think on
The
that.
biggest challenge when people commit, keeping the commitment. They say, oh yeah, I'm going to commit. I'm going to do it. I see the results of all these guys. And so I'm going to do this. And then they don't, because they don't know how. They don't know how to not put on the fertilizer. They don't know how not to spray for a bug, because they don't really know what it means to be regenerative. Regenerative is a mindset in our head. It's that mindfulness. It's not a list of practices that you do. The people in Africa are very regenerative, and they don't have the tools that we have in the West, but they can have some really thriving areas there. I mean, a lot of these people are illiterate. They're there in the Sahel south of the Sahara Desert, and they're pushing the Sahara Desert northward. We don't hear about that on the news. All we hear is that global warming is killing everybody and we'll all be dead in 100 years. That's what we hear from the media, and yet we have illiterate people who are pushing back the desert and growing plants. So because they know what to do and they know how to do that. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. It did. And you said you wouldn't tell people how to compost, but I'm going to ask that question.
Okay.
How do you build good compost?
Get my book and read the instructions. Compost can be tricky. If you don't make really great compost, then you can be spreading microbes out there that are bad. So you can be putting disease-causing fungus on your fields, and you don't want to do that. So you need to be careful with compost. But if you do want to do really great compost, it can be a good, fantastic tool. I make quite a bit of compost, and I think it's awesome, but you need a professional who knows how to make it. So if you don't have a person who can do a real good job in your area, then learn how. We actually teach classes here on the ranch on how to make compost. You could come to one of these classes, but you want a good mix of brown materials, which would be something like wood chips. So that would be like 60% of your material. And then you would want a green plant base, which would be something like any living green plant. So hay that was cut while it was green would be a green component. And then a high nitrogen, you'd want 10%. So that's 60% browns, 30% greens, and 10% high nitrogen. So high nitrogen would be something like alfalfa or grain.
Manure?
It depends what the animal ate, whether
Okay.
it's a green or a high nitrogen. A lot of manures are a good high nitrogen, but sometimes they're not, depending on what the animal's eating. And then there's a whole process you go through where you'll turn that every time it gets up to a certain temperature. So if you don't do all these ticky little things and have the moisture just right and the temperatures just right, you can make a lot more bad compost than good compost. So you need to know how to do it, and you need some professional training to make good compost. So
Yep. Good answer. Definitely believe in that principle. To the extent that we are closing the loop. And I would ask Josh this question if he's on, and he and I have conversed about this too. He imports compost from Alaska, the Alaskan humus. And I'm like, that is not sustainable. He's like, you're absolutely right, but nobody can build it. There, it's built, it's consistent. He can work with it. He can extract it. He can brew it. He gets a consistent product. So I guess within your individual context, how important is it for you to close that loop? Like we can't continue to import compost from Alaska, but a little bit goes a long ways when you extract it and when you make it, brew it and into a tea.
Yeah.
So it's not like when we think compost, we're thinking like truckloads and tons to be able to get a dusting of it out there.
Yeah.
This is, handfuls literally, or 25 pounds to cover hundreds of acres. So
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of knowing that. Okay, anything else we missed? Anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked? Anything that they didn't ask that they should have asked?
I don't know. I saw a comment about compost tea a second ago. Yes, compost tea is worth it. I love compost tea, except here again, it takes a professional to do it. If your equipment is not clean and sanitized before you start, you could be brewing bad guys. You don't want bad fungus out there that's going to eat your seeds so they don't come up. So you need to know what you're doing when you make it, and you need to be making it right. So yeah.
Now about Matt's question about raw manure. I remember when we were at a field, well, it was an intensive class with Nicole Masters in California, and the organic dairy farmer came in and said, "Hey, Nicole, how'd you like those brown fields where I just sprayed out this our manure slurry out of our manure pits?" And she's like, "Well, I prefer green. How's your weed problem?" She's like, "It's terrible. What do we do about it? We're organic." She's like, "Quit spraying that stuff." So what would your answer be to the raw manure guys?
Compost it, man.
Yeah.
If you have the material to compost, make good compost. I mean, how many people are in your local group that are trying to do this? Do you have 20 people in your area? Well, one of them needs to be a professional compost maker and make compost for the 50,000 acres around you. And if you have some dairies there, they're producing a lot of biomass. Are you in a place that has a brewery? They have a lot of waste that can be made into compost. Our biggest problem here in Nevada is there's no waste to compost. So we just use hay, and it ought to go through a cow first, but a lot of it doesn't because we're making compost out of it because it's the only thing we have. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right on, John. How do we do this at scale? It's ruminants. God created the perfect composters, the ruminants.
Right. That's why I say don't worry so much about compost. I do a lot of gardening classes. That's kind of my main thing. And for gardening context for people living in cities, composting can be a great thing. But when you're talking about hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of acres, you just use the cattle. In fact, the very best compost I can make is not as good finished product as a pasture fed cow that's pooping every day. It's going to get more microbes out there. And that's not just me saying that. That's the research from Dr. Johnson, who's invented one of the very best compost systems there is. And he's saying he can't compete with livestock. But if you have a waste product from a feedlot or a dairy,
these guys are saying, a couple people in the chat are saying horse manure. How do we use that if the horse has been fed ivermectin? So they probably
compost it. It's fine.
Okay.
Anytime that there's some kind of a chemical input, you compost it and it'll be okay. Most of those things go away. There's one herbicide. I'm not in the world of herbicides, so I don't know the name, but I think there's one called paraquat or something. And if you use the manure, even if you compost it, it's still viable and it'll kill your plants. So
it's probably outlawed, I think.
I hope so. It needs to be.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody else might know. Put it in the chat if you know what that is. But Okay, so there's our discussion about compost. Anything else that they need to know as they are transitioning to regenerative or scaling up the regenerative?
Find a mentor. In fact, find 4 or 5 mentors, especially people who disagree with each other. You don't want, if you have 5 mentors and they are all totally agree on every little thing, you don't have the right mentors. You need some people who kind of disagree a little bit. You know, I don't mean to be vicious and mean to each other, but you need different perspectives in this thing. Now, let me be clear. They all need to be on the regenerative route, and they all need to be doing this, but you need people who are thinking and trying new things and innovating. And so there's going to obviously be some disagreement in there. That's good because you can get different perspectives, because you're going to run into problems and you're going to run into challenges and you won't know what to do. And if you can go talk to several people about it, and then you can get the different perspectives, and that will help you to make the best decisions on your own farm.
Yep, good. I think that's good. We're just sharing the link. We just got notification. Some people are having trouble jumping back in. We're working on mitigating that. Hopefully, let me let you keep talking for just a minute. Share some of your wisdom. I'm going to switch cameras and I'm going to go give our next speaker a call and make sure he can get in.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
So you're on that?
So I'm when I wrote this book that I was talking about earlier, I put together that forms comparison chart. That's the chart I mentioned earlier with the 4 ecosystem processes. And I just wanted to share something. I wrote this whole book because I made this form. So Jared's been talking about people who are starting out in this regenerative movement and how do you get started. Well, when I got started, it was hard to make sense of all the information. And so I just started writing how everything works together. And that's when I created what I call the forms comparison chart, is where you have the water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow, and the community dynamic. And how does everything else fit into that? Because you've got the principles, you've got all the different organisms, you've got Elaine Ingham and Dr. Johnson and Gabe Brown and all the other names of the people out there who are promoting this as a good thing to do. And we can agree that it's a good thing to do, but how do you get started? So that's where my entire book came from, is just trying to understand how it all fits together. So that's the way that I put this chart together, because it was hard to know what decision to make. So once I got this chart built, I had to explain it. And then that's where chapter 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all the different chapters of the book came from. So when you are looking at making a decision on your farm, like you need to decide on making a management decision. Let's say you're going to build a fence across your farm for whatever reason. Well, you want to run that decision through all 4 ecological processes. If I build a fence going through here, is that going to help me or hurt me on the water cycle? Will that fence affect it? In some situations, in some context, it could affect the water cycle. You wouldn't think it would, but maybe it could. And so you would ask 100 questions about that to try to figure it out. And then you'd do the same thing with the mineral cycle. If I put this fence here, what's it going to do to my mineral cycle? And what's it going to do to my energy flow? What is it going to do to my ecological succession? So if you can answer yes, putting up this fence is going to help each of those 4 ecological processes, then it's probably a really good idea to put up the fence. If it's not going to help them, then why are you putting up the fence? And you need to have a really good reason why, if it's not going to help all 4 of those processes. Now, if it's going to hurt even one of the processes, then you wouldn't want to make that decision. You can say, yeah, but it's going to enhance 3 of them, but hurt a 4th one. Well, then that still is a bad decision. Don't put that fence up if it's going to hurt it. So that's just something to remember. You want to run any decision you make through all of the four ecological processes. When you're studying Alan Savory, he calls it it's the whole holistic planning, and you have your context checks that you would do. So anyway, those are super important things that you want to do. You want to be asking those questions. Jared talks about it a lot, but he often says, let's go 7 layers deep. Let's ask enough questions that we can get to the root cause of this. So we're seeding down 40 acres to a cover crop this year. And so this last winter we had a meeting and we talked about it. We had one field, it was an irrigated field, but it was one of the most unproductive irrigated fields on the ranch, but we thought we could fix it. And so we put in a cover crop, and it's been 2 years ago now, and it thrived and it was beautiful last year. And so we thought, well, let's do it again this year. And what field would we do it on? And so we're trying to improve each of the fields here by growing cover crops on them. And, you know, it's something that you don't always, you wouldn't normally always do. In an irrigated pasture where you have grass growing, why would you be planting cover crops? And there's real argument that it's not going to help you. Well, in the context of what the one we did 2 years ago, it helped it a lot. And so we're trying to jumpstart and help this other field now that we're going to do this spring. So you want to be asking a lot of questions about each of the, like any decision that you have to make. Ask a lot of questions about it, and it can really help you. Okay, so I'm just going to share one more thing with you real quick here. There's some really important tools that we often will use that need to be have a context check against the 4 ecological processes. And one of them is compost. So compost is a tool, but not in every situation will compost be the right thing. So you need to ask the questions. If I put compost on a community that doesn't need the compost, then what's it going to do? Well, it wastes my compost for one thing. Is it actually helping it? So those are the kind of questions. The second tool is observation. With modern cell phones today, then I think every phone nowadays has a camera. It is awesome because you can just go out there and you can be taking pictures of stuff. And if you have a good way to file your pictures, then you can see how things change over time. We have the Alan Savory people come out every year and they do ecological monitoring here on the ranch. And they're taking pictures and they're collecting a lot of data. And so over time, we can see what's happening and what's changing on the ranch. But we, here again, when we make management decisions, we need to make sure that the decision we're making is going to enhance all 4 of the processes. And remember, if it enhances 3 of them, but it's hurting one of them, you don't do it. That is our rule. We never will make a management decision if it hurts one of the processes. The third tool is landrace seed breeding. You need to be raising your own seeds. Even if you're just a pasture person, you know, if you can raise your own seeds of your own grasses, forbs, and legumes, if you have a way to get out there and harvest them, it's good because they are adapted to your local conditions and they will grow better crops and you'll have more resilient grass to grow. Number 4 is the microscope. That's a fantastic tool to be able to see the critters in your fields and to see what's happening. Obviously, we're talking about the microbes, but they are your most important livestock. I'm always telling people that, and they generally are laughing at me, but it's pretty true. And then we have all the different soil tests, the water infiltration tests, soil penetrometer, the shovel test. So these are all ways that you can go out into the field and do tests on the ground to see if it is improving. And that's something that anybody can learn quick, and you can do that just to see if you have earthworms, see the structure of your soil, see if where you had like miserable compaction, if it's loosening up. And you should start seeing improvements. You know, in your first year, you'll see some improvements. By 5 years, you should see massive improvements. You can do plant species counts. You can do other fun things like slake tests to see how your soil stability is. Some of these things are a little bit more academic and you don't need to do them, but they're fun things to do and they're very educational and helpful for, especially if you have young people, so that they can get the full benefit of the education of all the things you can be doing. Okay, so those are some good things. Thanks for letting me share with you today.
Hey, we're still not live, so you got to pinch it. Okay, guys, so what's happening here? Our next speaker is at an event which is being broadcast on Zoom. So it's not just us. So do your best not to leave because it will not let you back in. It's not just an Ag Steward thing. This is a Zoom apocalypse here. So what he said was, is that it's not just us. So stay in the room. And they're going to try to call in and we'll see if we can add them to the call. So hang tight and William can keep running here.
Okay, let's go ahead and ask me some questions. I mean, I can talk forever, but that's no fun. If you want to type in the chat. Okay, John Meyer said, how do microplastics affect composting? You know, I don't know. There's the question that stumped me today. I've been learning a lot about microplastics, how they're acting as a toxin and they're everywhere on the earth and it's causing problems. So yeah, I don't know how they affect composting. I'm not sure. So that's good. Let me see. Beetle-friendly wormers. I have no idea. So we haven't wormed cattle here for well over a decade and probably going on to 2 decades. We do all of the parasite control just by breaking the cycle of moving the cattle a lot. So that's what we're doing here with our management. So I don't know of a beetle-friendly wormer. We are seeing less dung beetles and other insects in the fields where there's like the neighbors when we go look at their cow pies. We're seeing a lot less, but on our ranch, they're pretty thick. So, which is a fantastic thing. So that's good. What is the best way to determine stocking rates, or how many animals can you have on a property if that data is not available? So you need your own data. So we do education here on the ranch. Jared could, he's licensed with the Savory Institute to do that kind of education. But what you would do is you go out into the field and you would collect your how much grass is growing or forage is growing on a certain amount of square feet. So you just like take 2 or 3 square feet and you bring it in and you dry it. We usually just stick it in the microwave to dry it. And then there's a mathematical calculation to tell us how much forage is out there. And then we calculate it based on a unit, which we use 1,000 pounds of beef. You don't use number of head because they weigh different amounts. So you need to know your total poundage of beef. So if you're running like 600 pounders, then you would just do a calculation. How many do you have? They're averaging 600 pounds. And then you get your unit of 1,000 pounds. And then you can make another calculation that tells you how many days you can stock the land with. So like, will this pasture feed the cattle for 1 day or 5 days or whatever? So there's that part. So that's the basics of how you do that. As far as like, even if there were charts on it from somewhere, that'd be wrong because you have to calculate it pretty much every year because it's going to change every year. If your land is improving and you're growing more forage, then you can run more cattle on there every year. So this is thing that skill that every rancher, every operator would want to learn how to do. How to calculate your land, how much grass there is, so that you know how many cattle to put on there. Okay, any thoughts on growing vegetables in low-lying areas that can be waterlogged at times with heavy clay soils? Yeah, so build raised beds. That is the purpose of raised beds. It's interesting because before the 1990s, almost all of the books that were published, the gardening books, they were published in the eastern United States, and so raised beds became a big thing. And then everybody in the western arid United States started building raised beds, and now they have to water a lot more. So it's kind of funny. Yeah, just use raised beds. That's the purpose of a raised bed, is to, let that water drain out and go away. Yeah, so the raised beds are they're the key. Do you recommend using plant matter from trees as feed for cattle? If that can that be possibly impact stocking rates too? Yeah, for sure. In ancient days, before people started cutting hay, they would cut the branches of the trees and make bundles, and then they would hang those up in their barn, and that was the hay. We're talking ancient times, though, hundreds of years ago, because I think they've been cutting meadow hay with a sickle and scythes for, hundreds of years. But there's archaeological evidence of people cutting the trees, and you would cut them off at the ground, a small tree, and then it would grow several branches coming up, but they'd be long and straight, so they'd be 6 to 8 feet tall. And then you could put 10 or 15 of those together, and that is what they would call tree hay. So yeah, you can do that. It's very labor intensive. So if you had one cow, you could probably do it. As far as on scale, if you have a lot of low hanging branches or a lot of shrubby type material, you can certainly add that foliage in to the total biomass. If the cattle are grazing it, if it's a plant that they're going to be eating, certainly you can add that in as part of your feed. Yeah, John, you have a good point here. The tannin in the woody species is a natural dewormer. That's one of the reasons you want a lot of diversity. One of the soil health principles is diversity, diversity, diversity. And one reason you want so much diversity is because most of the plants that are out there are actually medicinal plants. There's different kinds of plants. You got the aromatics, well, they're medicinal. You've got nutritives, a lot of those are actually medicinal too. We have a few that are mostly medicinal, and animals don't eat them very much. So those are, but you want to remember that if you have the plants available, when an animal is sick, it will choose to eat the plant when it needs it. Like chimpanzees will go out of their range, like miles away from where they normally live, to eat certain plants that only grow far away from where they live, so that they can get the medicinal value. And if you watch sheep, goats, cattle, whatever, if you watch them very closely and you're out there with them a lot, you will see that if you have one that's sick, it's eating a different diet than ones that are normally healthy. Obviously, if they're too sick, they're not eating at all, but that's a real thing. And that's one of the real benefits of having the diversity out there in the pastures, is the animals can self-medicate. Of course, the modern way of thinking is that, if you have all those plants out there, then you're going to, there's just a bunch of weeds, we got to get rid of them. But yeah. How we doing, Jared?
Hey, we're
How's the apocalypse?
the whole world is shut down on Zoom. Bart and Sunny, can you guys hear us?